So our collector this week came up recently when I was training some new student technicians. I typically choose typed labels in English for them to practice on when they're first learning to transcribe. As you know, it's a lot easier than the handwriting or other languages. And one of those countries, in this case this week or last week, was Ceylon, which you may know is a historic name for the country of Sri Lanka, which is an island off the coast of India in the Indian Ocean. And we have a number of these specimens from Ceylon that were collected by a Dr. Thwaites. And so I thought it would be interesting to look a little bit into him. You can see there's not a lot of information on the front, aside from country, scientific name, and the collector. There's not a date. There's not any more specific locality information. Luckily, there is a little bit more data inside. So we had this handwritten label. It's a little hard to make out, but down here, this is CENT-PROV, which stands for the Central Province of Ceylon, which is right here in the middle. And it's famous, among other things, as a source of Ceylon tea, which was planted there by the British in the 1860s, largely to replace coffee crops that were being decimated by disease. And the province also, fun fact, has a really cool flag featuring a lion holding a sword, which is actually kind of terrifying, but I thought was interesting. So when I searched for a Dr. Thwaites, so the specimen, getting ahead of myself, or specimens you can see here were identified as Funaria nepalensis, which is a synonym of Funaria calvescens. The genus Funaria grows in moist, shady, and cool places, on rocks, walls, and crevices. And this is just a picture I found of that species, which I think is pretty adorable. So when I searched for a Dr. Thwaites associated with Ceylon, I found George Henry Kendrick Thwaites, who was an English botanist and entomologist, born in 1812 in Bristol, which is down here in the kind of the south of England. He originally worked as an accountant and had to support several younger brothers and sisters. So he pursued botany at first really as just a hobby. He was particularly interested in cryptogams and algae, but he also collected flowering plants. So in an early instance, he sent a list of the plants found within a 10-mile radius of Bristol to Hewitt Watson for his book, Topographical Botany. He was an early contributor to the magazine The Garden Chronicle, and he also experimented with plant cultivation, including raising 2 distinct varieties of fuchsia from embryos in the same seed. And he was also very interested in entomology, collecting insects from his local area, and some of his earliest papers were actually related to entomology. So in 1839, he became the local Bristol secretary for the Botanical Society of London. And in 1841, he was engaged by Dr. William Benjamin Carpenter to revise the 2nd edition of his work, General Physiology. In 1846, he became a botany and vegetable physiology lecturer at the Bristol School of Pharmacy and later their medical school. He became known as a skilled microscopist, publishing a number of microscopic studies in the 1840s. And his observations on the cell membranes of plants was quite notable at that time. He made a number of important discoveries, including showing that diatoms were algae and not animals, and observing some of the first instances of their conjugation. Obviously he was developing his botanical career, becoming more well-known. And in 1849, Thwaites made a big move and replaced the late George Gardner as superintendent of the botanical gardens at Peradeniya in Ceylon, which is now Sri Lanka. And he would end up working there for over 30 years. Throughout the 1850s, he studied and described many single-leaf plants, including 25 new genera. In 1857, he became director of the botanical garden, and in that role, he had more responsibilities in the realm of applied agricultural botany. In 1860, he established cinchona nurseries in Gala, which is another city in the central province, and he helped to successfully cultivate those plants, which are used to make quinine, which you may know is a treatment for malaria, so very important. And he also worked on studying the cultivation of vanilla, tea, cardamom, cacao, coffee. So a lot of different, very economically important plants, including that Ceylon tea. And in 1869, he shared some of the first specimens of the destructive coffee leaf fungus. And though he studied it for the next decade, he was unable to find any effective cures. Interestingly, I was able to find a couple other images of him. So the one on the left is a photograph taken in 1881 or 1882, and you can see Thwaites sitting beneath a very large tree in the Botanic Gardens where he was working, and it was taken during a visit from two British princes, so Prince Albert Victor and Prince George, who later became King George V. And then also this drawing from an earlier royal visit to the Botanic Gardens by the Prince of Wales, Albert Edward, who became King Edward VII. And Thwaites was reported to be a knowledgeable host and tour guide at the Botanical Garden. And you can actually see him right here on the right-hand side. It says Mr. Thwaites. And I love that he's wearing a top hat out in the field. Maybe not done as much today. So while performing his commercial and educational duties, he also continued to study the local flora. Starting in 1858, he published the work Enumeratio Plantarum Ceyloniae, which is in English an enumeration of Ceylon plants in 5 parts. And it was a comprehensive list of the plants of Ceylon, including descriptions of some new and lesser known species. He had included habitat information, practical uses, and native names for those plants. And he was also assisted in the taxonomy by J.D. Hooker. In response to this work, he was awarded a PhD by the Imperial Leopoldo Carolingian Academy, which is now the German Academy of Sciences. Though interestingly, in his letters, he said that he didn't think it was necessary, and he would have told them not to if they had asked him, which I thought was kind of funny. He continued to collect cryptogams, sending mosses, lichens, and fungi to specialists back in Europe. And he also continued to collect and study insects, contributing a number of new species to Frederick Moore's Lepidoptera of Ceylon. And he also published in the Transactions of the Entomological Society, the Phytologist, the Annals of the Magazine of Natural History, and a number of other scientific journals. He resigned his position in 1879 and retired with a pension in 1880. Thwaites chose not to return to his homeland, instead buying the Fairland bungalow above the city of Kandy. And he passed away 2 years later in 1882 at the age of 70. So during his career, Thwaites described or revised over 900 taxon names per the International Plant Names Index. He was elected a Fellow of the Linnaean Society in 1854, the Royal Society in 1865, and in 1878, the British government honored his years of service by making him a companion of the Order of St. Michael and St. George, which is a civilian honor. There are a number of genera and species named for Thwaites, including the climbing plant Kendrickia. There's an algae genus, there's a spider genus, there's a butterfly species, this little species of skink, which is also called Thwaites skink. And then I found almost 200 plant species, just initially looking, that were named in his honor, so quite a bit. There are over 1,200 of his specimens in our Bryophyte portal, 91 lichens, 36 in vascular symbiota. There's over 3,000 in GBIF, and I did find 2 in the macroalgae portal, including this little specimen slide, which is, you can see the type specimen for another species, a little species of algae that was named after him. And it says that I did read that most of his specimens that he collected in Britain before his move were housed at the University of Bristol Herbarium, which was destroyed during World War II. So sadly, most of those were lost, but not all. So these ones here, these beautiful kind of teal-y colored ones, are actually cyanobacteria specimens that he collected near Bristol in, I think, 1846. So not all of them were lost, but most of the specimens that were preserved are from his time in Sri Lanka. Many of those are housed at the National Botanic Gardens, where he spent most of his career. And there's also some at the Botanic Gardens in Kew. And a lot of his cryptogams are stored at the Natural History Museum of London. So that is George Henry Kendrick Thwaites, Dr. Thwaites, an important figure in the history of botany in Sri Lanka. So thank you again for listening.